U.S. President Joe Biden reaches the 6-month mark in the White House. What has he achieved so far, and what are some of the biggest challenges ahead? Hello, I'm Arnold Neidem, and this is The Heat. Six months after being sworn in as President of the United States, Joe Biden faces a series of major challenges that stretch from Capitol Hill to Afghanistan. The 78-year-old president is trying to get a huge infrastructure plan through Congress, and he's also facing big foreign policy challenges, including the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Meanwhile, he's also dealing with a surge in COVID-19 cases across the United States. He talked about that when he met with his cabinet on Tuesday.
We have to stay vigilant, especially with the Delta variant that's out there. While COVID-19 cases are rising, virtually all of the COVID deaths and hospitalizations are from unvaccinated people. Let me say it again, virtually all are from unvaccinated people. And that means the safest thing to do is to get vaccinated.
We have a great panel to weigh in on all of this. Joining us from New York is Jadan. He is a conservative commentator and contributor to Metropolitan magazine. With us from Maryland is Democratic Party strategist Joel Rubin. He is a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State during the Obama administration. Joining us too is Joseph Williams. He is senior news editor for U.S. News and World Report. And also with us is Rafael Bernal. He's a reporter for the political newspaper The Hill. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. And Jadan, let me start with you. When Biden was sworn in as president 6 months ago, COVID was raging at that time. Now, after 6 months of a pretty successful vaccination program and opening up of the economy, we see COVID raging again across the country. Did the president perhaps take a little bit too much credit for the first 6 months in combating COVID?
Absolutely, I don't think so at all, Anand. This is really a story of COVID to COVID. This is a COVID presidency. And, Donald Trump, when he ended his presidency, he went down, unfortunately, as a COVID president. And, Joe Biden may have been quick to claim victory, but the victory is real. We have high vaccination rates in the United States and compared to most other industrialized nations. And in general, our economy is reopened. However, there are challenges, and I think, for what Biden is trying to achieve, especially on kind of the social infrastructure angle, that those items are really going to have to take a back burner to really focusing on making sure the economy continues and focusing on battling COVID. That is the real priority, and anything else that Democrats want to do and that President Biden wants to do is just misguided.
Joel, Biden's approval ratings were boosted by his response to COVID. And as Jadan just pointed out, there were significant achievements in far as combating COVID. You've got almost 50% of the country which is fully vaccinated, up to 70%, which is at least with one dose of the vaccine. But now that the numbers are rising again, what are the dangers for his presidency at this stage?
Yeah, Anand, that's right. What we have witnessed in the first 6 months of the presidency is a significant boost in the country's health. We've seen the president achieve the goals that he set out to achieve early on, but he brightly points out that we are in a bit of a drag right now, and the parts of the country that are not vaccinated are suffering directly, and that has to stop. So I think for President Biden, he has two goals. First is to keep on pressing and try to change the dynamic in those holdout areas of the country where people just don't want to be vaccinated, even though those are the people most at risk. And he has to continue to press his domestic agenda. We're in a transformative moment. There are major bills on the Senate floor and on the House floor, soon to be, that is. They're going to essentially invest nearly $4 trillion into the United States economy to help transform us at this critical moment. And that's where he really needs to also apply his pressure. So it's a lot. It's a heavy task, but he certainly has a plan for both.
Right, and those are just the domestic issues. He's got some big foreign policy challenges as well. Joseph Williams, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Biden is also claiming credit for a strong U.S. economy. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We've gone from 60,000 jobs per month to 60,000 jobs every 3 days. More than 600,000 jobs per month since it took office. More than 3 million new jobs all told. That's the fastest growth, I'm told, at this point in any administration's history.
So, Joseph, those are indeed good numbers, but shouldn't we also be wary of the fact that there is now a risk of inflation? And we've seen how the markets have reacted over the COVID situation. We've seen what happened over the past week.
Well, I think that inflation is less a risk than a resurgence of COVID. Now, look, there have been a lot of economists that have said that the reason why we have temporary inflation is because we put the economy in hibernation and then all of a sudden gave it a jolt to try to come out of that hibernation once COVID, the initial days of the pandemic, were over. So the inflation is just basically a supply chain lag. And a lot of economists that I've talked to expected that we'll catch up and end that lag probably in the next 3 to 4 months. However, the lurking danger out there is COVID. I mean, because certainly we have a portion of the population that's unvaccinated, that's resisting vaccination, and those are the southern tier of states. And they could very well prompt another resurgence of the virus, particularly if the Delta variant takes hold in those states and it becomes something that's resistant to people who've even had their vaccines. Today, Jen Psaki mentioned at the podium that there have been 2 White House staffers, at least 2 that we know of, who have had vaccinations but still tested positive for COVID. To me, that's a worrying sign, and that overshadows the economic agenda, because the reason why we got in the recession in the first place is because the virus put us there, and we had to put the economy in hibernation, so to speak. And now that we're coming out of it, the variants are on our shores. The people who don't want to get vaccinated have potentially dragging down the other people who do want to get vaccinated, and that to me is a bigger threat than inflation.
Joseph, how important is it for Biden that the economy remains in a very strong, remains strong?
That's absolutely important, because we've got midterm campaign. The midterm campaign is probably going to start in earnest in a few months, certainly, and control of Congress is definitely at risk. If the economy goes south, then so do his prospects of holding both houses of Congress, as precarious as they are right now. Democrats have a very, very thin margin. It's going to get thinner if history is any kind of record. And Biden is going to have some second-term plans, and those plans all hinge on whether or not he can get his economic agenda through before the midterm elections. So I think it's a high priority. And again, I'll repeat it: the virus here is going to be an issue, and it's unless that gets fully under control, the economy is going to be at risk, and we're going to have some serious problems heading into 2022.
Joel, Rubin, before we move on to some of the other issues, one more question on the COVID situation, and there was a very novel suggestion from a reporter at the White House briefing, I think this was yesterday, in which he said, look, why doesn't President Biden get together with former President Donald Trump and appeal to those people, especially in those southern states that we've been talking about, to get vaccinated, which kind of on the face of it looks like a great idea. The press secretary didn't actually answer that question, but shouldn't that be done?
Sure. Oh, it would be a wonderful move if Donald Trump wanted to do it, but Donald Trump still is telling his people to think twice before getting the vaccine, despite his having been vaccinated back in January. And it's really his harm of his own people, his own supporters. That's what's most deplorable, quite frankly, to use that word about this moment, that Donald Trump can credibly say that the vaccine was largely developed on his watch, that he has taken it, he is safe, and that others should take it. But he stops before others should take it, and those are his supporters waiting for his signal. So I don't think the resistance would be from Joe Biden. Donald Trump still hasn't accepted that Joe Biden is president, though.
Rafael Bernal, Biden's big infrastructure plan is stalled right now on Capitol Hill, as we have seen. A Washington Post headline this week actually said, infrastructure deal in precarious state as endgame nears. But the president remains very bullish about the plan. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I think we're on the verge of maybe being able to get something really done. Rebuilding roads and bridges, replacing lead water pipes, delivering high-speed internet to every American, rural and inner city, and taking on the climate crisis with American jobs.
So, Rafael, I mean, we can see the Republicans are actually holding the line in their opposition to this plan. What are the prospects for Biden getting anything done?
It's actually quite likely that the Senate will move forward after this week. There's going to be a lot of Senate drama, but it really is just that. We'll see Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said he wants the initial vote, and this is just a tee-off vote to set off Senate procedure to consider the bill, and he wants that to happen tomorrow. Republicans say they want that to happen in a few days, and really, there's very little substance to that fight. And whether or not he loses that vote tomorrow, I mean, Schumer, he still has procedures, and you'll see his strategy develop. If he changes his own vote last minute, that means they're going to have another vote to tee up this process. But that's when it really gets complicated, because that's when you start getting into the substance, and then you have Republicans who are willing to vote for the package, and moderate Democrats who are unsure about certain parts of the package, and progressives, and they're going to butt heads. And it looks like the real issue right now is going to be climate, where some of those moderate Democrats and some of those moderate Republicans do not agree on how far this bill has to go on climate with progressives, and especially progressives in the House. So really this week, it's all just a sort of Senate intrigue and drama. But after this is when we'll really know if the bill is going to be challenged in a substantial way.
Jadan Horyn, what is your reading of the situation on this particular bill, the infrastructure bill? I mean, why are Republicans opposed to it?
You know, Republicans are opposed to the idea that, you know, at the last minute, the administration is seeking to pressure, you know, senators to add what they would include things that are not actual infrastructure. So, you know, making something acclimatized, while that is something that one could argue would be infrastructure, ultimately, if you want to replace something, you're replacing it with quality, you're replacing it with something that is substantial. But there is an additional cost for, you know, essentially adapting to climate change. And, you know, the Army Corps of Engineers often has, you know, a climate change additional add-on for cost. And so, you know, that for many Republicans, what they're looking at here is less about the bill itself and more about the fact that Democrats, and specifically the Biden administration, with Joe being essentially, you know, old school Democrat, and yet the feeling that progressives are running the show, and at the end of the day, you know, Republicans may or may not get this bill that they are agreeing to, that they are going out on a limb and saying they're willing to invest in America, because we know that Nancy Pelosi over in the House may prioritize the social spending bill that is a grab bag of goodies for Democrat objectives,
right,
that really has nothing to do with physical infrastructure. And at the end of the day, Republicans are concerned that their bill is not going to be prioritized and ultimately will be a poison pill for this other bill that will be rammed through in a evenly divided Senate and an almost evenly divided House. You know, there really is no mandate, and there was not a mandate for Joe Biden and Democrats for progressive change. What there was a mandate for was righting the ship of state, was saying they were done with the 4 years of what many Americans deemed as crazy, and instead they wanted solid leadership. That does not mean radical or transformative change, and
right,
just because that moment is here doesn't mean Democrats should embrace it.
Yeah, Jadan,
and Republicans really want to push back against that.
Yeah, aren't you giving a little bit too much credit to the progressive wing of the Democrat Party? Because there is opposition from that wing towards Joe Biden himself. I mean, you know, talk about the cost of this bill. The progressives are saying, well, that's not enough. We need to spend more.
Certainly. However, I would say that the progressive wing has the energy and the base, and they are able to apply force, and they are able to apply pressure in a way that moderates and centrists simply cannot. And frankly, in order for Joe Biden to win re-election in 4 years, or ultimately his successor to win, they need the base. Right. And they need an energized base. And so at the end of the day, that is where they're going to respond to, the most vocal part of their constituency. They're not going to respond to centrists who feel maybe marginalized but are unwilling to really go out on a limb for fear of being bulldozed over by their progressive counterparts.
All right, let me go to Joel. Let me go to Joel on this. Joel, yeah, Biden's taking flack from both sides here. Republicans saying this is too much money, and progressives in his own party are saying, well, actually, it's not enough.
Yeah, no, it's tough to be in the middle, isn't it? And Jaden's points, many of them are very strong, but we got to remember that the Republicans didn't even support the American Rescue Plan, the $1.9 trillion package that got through early in President Biden's term. Now they want to take credit for all of the benefits. There are example after example across the country of Republican members of Congress who voted no and now tell their people how great it is that they're getting money from the federal government. So this is all politics. There's going to be a bipartisan bill on hard infrastructure, about $650 billion that will get through in some way, shape, or form. And then the Republicans are going to have to look the other way, and $3.5 trillion will get through with solely Democratic support. And then I guarantee before the next election, those Republicans will be telling their voters that they support those bills and how great it is that they've delivered for their constituents.
Joseph Williams, as we mark the 6 month, the 6 months that Biden has been in office, there have been many people who say, look, Biden's going to be in office for just one term. He's a one-term president, and if we look, he will be over 80 when he finishes his first term. I mean, so how critical are the next few months going to be for him if he is to accomplish anything?
He's got to hold on to control of both houses of Congress, and that's going to mean getting out on the road and selling what he's done so far. That kind of intrigue about whether or not he'll run for a second term, so far he's been pretty consistent in saying that he believes he will run for a second term. But even if that's the case, there's still going to be, I would think, at least one or two challengers, depending on how well the second half of his first term goes. So I think everything is possible. I think anything is possible in this kind of political environment. Again, I hate to bring it back to COVID, but I think a lot of it will have to do with how well the response to this Delta variant and how well he is able to encourage Southerners and people who didn't vote for him to get vaccinated. Yeah,
the response to COVID seems to be the metric by which not just the leader of the United States, but leaders around the world are being measured by right now. Rafael Bernal, Biden is also under fire on immigration issues and those people who are undocumented in the United States. In fact, the administration suffered something of a legal setback last week when a judge ruled that an Obama-era program which protected young undocumented people, adults in the United States, from deportation was in fact not legal. It was illegal. So what pressure does that bring on the Biden administration right now to fix immigration?
So it was an unexpected setback because the judge ruling in that case on DACA, Andrew Hanen, has previously knocked down similar programs. It was less of a setback in the sense that people who are currently in the program were allowed to stay. But all this does is put even more pressure on Congress to actually, and on Democrats in Congress really, to act on immigration. Their base is now demanding it. A lot of their base, the relatives of their base now really need it. These are people who live in mixed status households. They need relief for their undocumented relatives. It also gives Republicans another weapon to sort of to play a little bit of brinksmanship with Democrats. But ultimately, all this will do is it will strengthen the card of progressives and pro-immigration Democrats who want to put immigration priorities in that bipartisan bill. The only question is whether they can legally do so, again, because of Senate rules. But it's really, all it's doing is really putting the onus even more so on Congress to act in terms of immigration.
But, Rafael, this is such a toxic issue for both parties. It's a hot button issue. Do you see any progress being made? And as you say, the rules in Congress, of course, make it very difficult for legislation to be passed as well.
Well, one thing that has happened is sort of Democrats have become the pro-immigration party and Republicans the anti-immigration party, with very important exceptions, you must say. But for Democrats, for moderate Democrats, for instance, it's a lot easier right now to vote on a pro-immigration bill. There's still some purple districts where it might be a tough pill to swallow, but it is something that the leadership in each chamber can sort of force down members' throats. It's you don't really see any anti-immigration Democrats anymore. So that's changed, and the political calculus changes with that. And Democrats know that actually both parties know that maintaining unity is very important going into next year's election. So basically, unless leadership really asks them to do something crazy, members in both parties are very likely to follow whatever leadership tells them is the political calculation.
Jadan Horyn, let's look at the one big foreign policy issue that's been preoccupying the White House, and that is President Biden's decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. He's been taking a lot of heat from that, from critics, mainly from conservatives. But, I mean, will the Republicans continue to hammer him on this decision to withdraw troops? What is the alternative?
I mean, this is just a case of political expediency for sure. Republicans know that the era of endless wars is over. Many of them supported President Trump's idea of withdrawing from Afghanistan. Many of them at that time thought it was a good idea. And, you know, I'll take one for the team on this side here and say Republicans are politicizing this because Joe Biden is a Democrat. At the end of the day, the American people have given a lot of blood, sweat, and treasure for the nation of Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, I don't really know what Americans can say we got from it. The Taliban is likely to retake over control of that country. And so, you know, I say to my fellow conservatives that to criticize Joe Biden is to also criticize the positions that most of you took just a few short months ago, and ultimately for a war that Americans simply do not support, and for something that ultimately has no beneficial outcome for the United States. So, you know, this is politics being politics, and unfortunately, you know, they're taking the opportunity to hit Biden on it.
Joel Rubin, this has been America's longest war, 20 years, and there are people who justifiably ask what has been achieved in 20 years. I mean, there are critics who say, look, Biden is leaving Afghanistan in crisis with the prospects of the Taliban taking over.
Yeah, that's right. And to Jaden's point, there is not a single actor in American public life or national security that has not had some of their fingerprints on this war. So there's a lot of shared blame and a lot of shared applause to go around for the applause of being the fact that we did root out al-Qaeda there and Osama bin Laden was taken off the battlefield. But to Jaden's point, it's very unclear now what happens, what will be the next phase for Afghanistan. And I do think it's worth mentioning the heartbreak and fear that many of those, including myself, who worked on this for a time in the executive branch, feel about what will happen to the Afghan people and those who supported the United States in Afghanistan. It's a big, difficult mess. It really is, and it's going to require continued diplomatic engagement. But this was a decision that was a long time coming. There were a couple of presidents that tried to get out before Joe Biden, including Barack Obama, who surged and then tried to find ways out. And so Joe Biden decided this is the time to make the move. But that doesn't mean that we are necessarily done with Afghanistan as an issue, as a diplomatic item, and certainly as a humanitarian issue as well.
Joseph Williams, the Capitol Hill riot investigation has been making news, with the House Select Committee getting ready for hearings on what happened on January 6th. There are Republicans who say, look, this is nothing more than a witch hunt against former President Donald Trump. But what is at stake for Joe Biden and the Democrats with this investigation? I mean, is there a public appetite to go after you know, the investigation right now?
Well, I mean, with one war ending, a pandemic, coming out of a recession, I mean, the easy answer is there really isn't. But the longer, more intricate answer is that people have got to pay attention to what happened here, mainly because what happened was so egregious, and it kind of dovetails with what's going on with voting rights legislation in some states. So you have a commission that Nancy Pelosi has set up, and that she is definitely stocked with her heaviest hitters, including one Republican, Liz Cheney, while Kevin McCarthy pretty much has put forward the kind of crew that you would have expected to see quizzing Hillary Clinton on Benghazi. They're going to be pro-Trump by and large. They're going to be people who kind of poo-poo the investigation, and they're there to protect Trump's right flank. But I think history demands that we find out exactly what happened. I think so far we've had very few answers about why things went down the way they did and about who might have been responsible. Even the Capitol Hill Police have not come forward and said what they knew when they knew it, except under questioning, and even then the questioning is fairly limited. So I think history demands it. I don't think the public necessarily will buy into it, and it could be a distraction for both parties in the upcoming midterms, depending on how the questioning goes. So I think that it's a responsible step to take because we do need to find out what happened, but politically speaking, it's risky for both sides.
Rafael Bernal, what are your thoughts on this? As Joseph just told us, politically speaking, it is risky for both sides. I mean, effectively, is this going to be a one-party investigation?
Well, I think that's exactly it. It is risky, but it is necessary. Republicans are going to basically, they're going to go on that panel to say that it's a one-party attack on Donald Trump. That is their goal. They've stated it outright, which is to derail the investigation, to practice a little bit of whataboutism.
Yeah.
But Pelosi, it's not such a simple task as just a clean investigation. There's a lot of politics involved, and they do run the risk of proving the Republicans right, and that could backfire easily.
Jadan Horyn, President Trump, former President Trump, still has a lot of influence in the Republican Party. Could this investigation hurt him?
It could possibly, but ultimately, Republicans perceive this to be a political witch hunt. It's not just President Trump that feels that. That doesn't mean that it's not necessary. There were real security lapses that occurred. As a former Capitol staffer, I can say that, I would be frightened to know that could be that could happen again. So we have to get to the bottom of what happened with those security lapses. Yeah. And frankly, politics aside, because politicians are going to politicize this for political points, absolutely. I'm not sure if the American public are going to be all that interested, but ultimately, our national security apparatus and our ultimately the different branches of government need to make sure that they are secure in the work that they are doing for the American people, and that's crucial.
Joel, Rubin, very quickly, we've only got about a minute left. 6 months in, and there's still very little evidence of bipartisanship in Washington. Beyond a change in tone, what does Biden have to do for this presidency to succeed?
He has to keep on doing what he's doing. He has to continue to message to the people who didn't vote for him, like he's trying to do on COVID, and just keep on working in meeting after meeting, as he has tried to do on the budget issues and bringing Republicans in. And just through repetition, demonstrate that that's how he wants to govern the country. He will need a willing partner on the other side. I don't think he's fully had that yet. There was no real honeymoon for Joe Biden when it came to Washington politics. But he's demonstrating that he understands that there's a bigger picture issue here, which is about healing the country. I know it sounds cliche, but it truly is how he's trying to govern. And he's gonna have to continue to do those engagements, even if it doesn't show up in the vote totals.
Okay, and we have to leave it there. We need to go. It's been a great discussion. Thanks for joining us on another edition of The Heat. Join us again next time.